Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's conversation. I am privileged and honored and delighted to have this conversation with OYE, the Organization for Youth Empowerment from Honduras. We have not funded an organization in Honduras for a very, very long time. So, this is such a wonderful opportunity to get to know both of you, get to know more about Honduras, and to get to know more about OYE. So my guests today, we have Amanda Hall, who is the coordinator of development and partnerships at OYE, and she is joining us from Columbus, Ohio. Hello, Amanda. Thank you for being here. We also have Duniya Perdomo, and she is the project coordinator at in El Progreso in Honduras. Hola, Duniya. Welcome. Happy to have you here.
Hola, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, OA has a fascinating origin story. So, would both of you like to share that with us?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Bina. And thank you so much for having us here for this opportunity to share more about our organization and the important work that we are doing together. OYE, which, as you mentioned, stands for the Organization for Youth Empowerment, was founded by three young people, Ana Luisa Ahern, Justin Eldridge Otero, and Jesse Makrin in 2005. But sort of the story of how our organization came to be goes back way further than that. Both Ana Luisa and Justin sort of grew up in the world of international development and actually lived for several years during their childhoods in Honduras, and then returned for several summers during their teenage years when they were in high school to volunteer at a home for children in El Progreso. And as they were graduating from high school and gearing up to start college, they realized that, their friends and their peers in Honduras who were, just as bright and had just as much potential, were looking at a very different reality. Instead of thinking about being able to go to college and getting prepared, buying textbooks and getting ready to start classes, they were thinking about how to find work, to support themselves, to live independently. And so there was kind of very, very different realities. And so then we fast forward a few years later, and they've graduated from college, and sort of with this feeling and fueled by this injustice of it all, they decided to return to Honduras and together with our third co-founder start a scholarship program for 6 young women to pursue higher education. And one of those young women is Duniya. So that was, again, our founding story was back in 2005. I personally came to the organization in 2014, so just over 8 years ago. I had already been living in Honduras. I first moved to Honduras in 2011 to volunteer at a home for children in sort of central Honduras. And then after 2 years or 24 months as a volunteer, I transitioned into a staff position at OYE, and I lived in Honduras for over 8 years with OYE and 10 years in total. And now I'm kind of in a transition period between the two countries and kind of paving a new path in my life and work with OYE. But I would love to take this back to Duniya. As I mentioned, the organization was founded 17 years ago with 6 scholarships, and one of them was Duniya. So I would love to kind of pass it over to Duniya to share a little bit about her story.
Yes, as Amanda was saying, I met Ana Luisa and Justin in one of these home of girls. They went to volunteer, and several years later, I started the university. I was working a part-time job. I was progressing very slowly, so the opportunity came. They invited me to be one of the 6 scholarships, the founding scholarships. I took advantage of this opportunity and I got my degree in industrial engineering. During that time, yes. During the time I was a scholarship student, my role was to give workshops in self-esteem and leadership for high school scholarship students that were in OYE years later, and that was my first opportunity in OYE. I had the opportunity to because of OYE to participate in a training program in Florida, 5 months, about strengthening youth organizations. Then years later, I was working in consulting work in engineering and as sporadically in as a math teacher. And they invited me in OYE to be a part of the board of directors. In the first meeting, I realized that the position of program coordinator was open, and I got very excited because I wanted to work here. So since it's almost 9 years, I have been working as the program and now project coordinator. And I have seen many of growth stories of many young people that have been impacted by OYE. Now it's the staff are more than half people that have had a journey in OYE, and we are part of the staff.
Wonderful. What a wonderful way for this to come in absolutely full circle, Duniya. That's such a wonderful story. So there's something interesting about the town that OYE is in. Such a wonderful history of social justice. It seems to incubate this whole thing about self-determination and independence and fighting for social justice. So why don't the two of you share that with us?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, the town that we're located in is called El Progreso, and in Spanish, that actually translates to progress. And so we are located in Honduras, and I think there's a lot of, there can be a lot of thoughts about Honduras, especially with what you see on the news. About Honduras being a part of the Northern Triangle countries and being a country that so many people are fleeing from because of poverty and because of violence. And while that is true, Honduras is one of the most impoverished and most unequal countries in Latin America. It also, like you said, is an absolutely beautiful country that has such a rich history, as a country, and also specifically our town, El Progreso, being located where the former banana plantations were of the United Fruit Company, the place of a really important workers' strike in 1954. And also, as you said, has a really strong connection with social justice movements, of a presence of Jesuit organizations, of the Sisters of Notre Dame. And I think it's such, there's so much beauty in Honduras as well, and so much happening. OYE is a secular organization. We have no political affiliations as well. We are a youth empowerment organization, but our country and our community here does have, a history of that. We do share that kind of progressive history and commitment to social justice.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we see that with organizations around the world, that there's a lot of intertwining with what else is going on in the country and what else is incubating these ideas that help these organizations move forward. So you have a very interesting, comprehensive model of youth empowerment. It is unique to you, it's unique to El Progreso, it includes both boys and girls. Can you tell us more about your very, very unique program?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So as we said, what started as this scholarship program, very small, for 6 young women to pursue higher education, has evolved into this comprehensive youth empowerment model that seeks to create opportunities for young people to empower themselves and transform their lives, transform their families, transform their communities. We believe that empowerment comes from within, that it's not something that you can give to someone, but something that you kind of find within yourself, and that young people have so much potential, and what they need are opportunities. So through our model, we kind of have 4 pillars, or 4 ways that we create opportunities for young people. The first is education. So that's primarily through providing scholarships, but also supporting teacher training and other school-based initiatives to keep students learning, to keep them motivated and in school. The second is health and well-being. So that's promoting mental health, emotional well-being, and also facilitating information and education on sexual and reproductive health and rights. The third is leadership and community engagement. And so that's all about building young people's sense of belonging, developing their leadership and life skills, and creating spaces for them to engage with each other and with their communities through workshops, through youth-led programs in the creative arts and sports and other youth-led initiatives. And then finally, economic opportunity, which is supporting young people to enter the workforce or to start their own businesses or strengthen existing businesses to generate and earn income for themselves and for their families. But one of our most important cross-cutting themes is gender equity. So we do work, as you say, with young women and young men, but one of the ways that our sort of commitment to gender equity shows up in our work is prioritizing girls and young women's participation and leadership in our programs. Historically, over 60% of our young people are young women, and leadership positions are also for young women. But actually in recent years, we're getting closer to 70%. And something that we're especially proud about is, promoting young women's leadership across the board in all different spaces, but especially in spaces that are traditionally dominated by men. And I have a very clear example of that is that our youth-led sports program, Deportes en Acción, has actually been led consecutively for the last 8 years by 4 different young women. And as you know, sports is usually a space that is so dominated, so male dominated. And so that's something that we're really incredibly proud of, is that that program has been led by young women for the last 8 years. And another important way that this shows up is also through engaging young men as allies. We believe that creating empowering spaces for girls and young women is vitally important, and that's really what this project focuses on, that we're getting, support from the RISE community. But we also think it is so important to work on breaking down the barriers that hold young women back, and so much of that is tied to traditional gender norms and forms of masculinity. And we truly believe that, gender equality can't be achieved if we're not engaging young men to work on themselves and to reimagine what masculinity can and should be, and for them to work alongside young women to advance gender equality. So that's kind of giving a little bit of a quick overview of our model and how we work and how we engage both young men and young women, but with this sort of gender focus to advance gender equality. And so I would love to, pass the word over to Duniya to share a little bit how our project, which is supported by RISE, Girls Leading Change, kind of fits into that model.
Yes, this project we named Girls Leading Change wants to incorporate 3 or 4 of our components of our model: education, health and well-being, and leadership and engagement. How we are providing the girls scholarships to continue their educations. We're creating spaces too for them to learn about their sexual and reproductive health and rights, and developing their leadership skills to replicate what they will learn to their peers and their families, and for them to have the skills to advocate for broader access to comprehensive sex education. As Amanda was explaining too, the girls will not just lead peers of girls. They will be leading groups of boys and girls. That is one important thing, that the boys see that girls can lead too. We became interested in this topic, or this kind of projects, since 2015, when we started to scale up our efforts to promote sex education beyond the walls of our organization. We were training youth leaders to facilitate workshops at local schools, several local schools, in these topics to 7th and 9th graders. Through these efforts, we realized that the problem and the weakness of our education system, and that's why we came to. I'm gonna shift to Spanish now.
Sure.
Bueno, nosotras empezamos a ver que este tema afectaba más a las chicas. Y entonces fue que empezamos trabajando con grupos de chicas para que aprendieran sobre sus derechos sexuales y reproductivos y también defendieran pues derechos, y ahí fue cuando empezamos a trabajar en una política pública. 35 chicas y varios aliados de la comunidad. Se creó la política y pues fue aprobada el año pasado.
So just to kind of share a little bit about what Duniya was just sharing with us. Through this work, in facilitating workshops for 7th to 9th graders in local schools, we started to really understand the dimension of the problem and also start thinking about how could we do things in a different way and in a more sustainable way and have a greater impact, because our capacity as a small local organization with limited resources, we kind of realized that we would never be able to reach the thousands, more than 30,000 children and young people in schools who don't have access to this education and are not receiving it in other spaces, at home or in other spaces. At least most of them are not. And so we started thinking about that, and also how this lack of information, is affecting girls and women more. And so we started thinking about how could we create spaces to engage and create empowering spaces for girls and young women to learn about their rights, and also advocate for that through public policy work. And so we started, thinking about this. This was over 5 years ago, and throughout the years and through different generations of girls, more than 35 girls have participated along with our staff and allies from other organizations to create a public policy to make comprehensive sexuality education mandatory in local public schools. It was a long effort. It took a lot of hard work, a lot of advocacy, a lot of meetings at the local municipal government building. And after 4 years, actually last year in July, the public policy was finally passed by our local city council. So there was so much work that went into that. And while that is something that we are immensely proud of, there's also still so much work ahead of us in Honduras and in our community. And I guess across the region, I think lots of times public policies are approved, but then they just kind of stay on paper and we don't actually see them put into action. And so an important part of this project is continuing to push that forward and engage and involve girls and young women in, holding local officials accountable for this right that they have. And yeah, so that's kind of.
Yeah. But Duniya, this is so impressive. Yes, you wanted to say something.
Yes, that one part, important part is that the girls will work with 100, more than 100 students, so they can be advocates too.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. But we're seeing this across the world with young people wanting more information, demanding their rights, especially in the sexual reproductive health realm. And Amanda, you've seen some of the arguments we are facing even here in the United States with adults trying to restrict what is being read in libraries and what children are presented in schools and things like that. So you're presenting a model of how young people need to pursue this and ask for this. And for you to have advocated all the way to get this as part of public policy is so, so impressive that you've demanded your rights, you've stated it, and you have worked all the way through to get this to happen. That is truly inspirational.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I think the important thing is that this is not something that we did alone. This is something, it's many, many, years in the making. And of course, our girls and women and staff have been instrumental in that, but also, the relationships that we have in our community and also funding partners that have, funded this important work. And that has been so critical. I think, projects and organizations in Honduras, in the region, are so critically underfunded when you look at trends and, funding across the globe. Honduras specifically, lots of funders, I think, kind of run away from Honduras because of sort of maybe the reputation that it has and the challenges that Honduras faces. But we have been so fortunate to have an amazing group of funders who have believed in our organization and believed in the importance of what we're doing. And so I just wanted to make sure that that piece was reflected here as well.
Absolutely. No, it is our honor and privilege to fund you. You are an extremely inspirational organization. As we wrap up, any last thoughts about some visions for the future?
Yeah, I think in terms of our visions for the future, I would love to share a little bit also about one of the things that we are most proud of. And I think that kind of relates to how we're moving into the future and what we vision for the future. And that is truly how our organization, but mostly how our young people stand out in the spaces and communities that we're a part of. Um, Young leaders from our organization have traveled across the country and across the region to facilitate workshops and youth conferences on topics of gender, masculinity, leadership, communications. And I think there's a quote that I'd like to share from one of our young people that I think sums up this sentiment really well. And it says, "A teacher is always telling us the young people from OYE are different. They are distinguished by something. It is obvious that we talk and know about different topics. I think that people recognize that those of us who are scholarship students and part of the organization conduct ourselves with respect, tolerance, commitment." And this is my favorite part right here. It says, "We don't understand leadership as I'm going to be the best or I have to stand out, but rather as I have to do things well so that the community shines." And I just think that really embodies kind of what we believe to be leadership and how, our vision for the future is to be an organization that is seen as a leader in what we're doing. And be able to share what we've learned with other organizations, other community organizations across Honduras, across the region. I think we're asked all the time, it would be so great to see OYE pop up in like other cities in Honduras or in other countries. And while we would love to see our model replicated in other places, I think there are so many amazing community-based organizations that are already out there, that are already doing incredible work in their communities, that already have all of those connections. And how can we as an organization support other organizations to incorporate new elements into our work or their work, parts of our model that we think are working really well. And so I think that's our vision, to be able to continue learning and continue evolving our model, but also being able to share that with other organizations, and also learn from them as well. That's been such a critical part of our journey as an organization, is learning from other organizations and absorbing what they're experts in. And so I think our vision for the future is being able to do that for other organizations as well.
Absolutely. I think when we stop recording and when we go offline, I'll get you connected to some of the organizations RISE has funded. In fact, we just did one, Soccer Without Borders, in Nicaragua, which is all about sports. So there may be some commonalities over there. So there are others across the world too. Maybe some of our chapters will get you connected to some of the organizations here in the United States. You are a gem and you are shining bright, and you are a wonderful model for the country of Honduras. Gracias, Duniya, for being here. And thank you, Amanda. And thank you for this wonderful conversation that we have had.